Welcome to the Innovation Ecosystem Podcast. We interview remarkable and thought-provoking guests about innovation, leadership, and change in the world of business. Whether you're an executive or an entrepreneur, our objective is to help you and your organisation create an entrepreneurial culture, become more innovative, and better able to respond to change. Each week, we'll deconstruct world-class performance from the arenas of business, academia, science, and sports. Each week, you can expect key insights, fresh perspectives, and proven tools you can use straight away to make you more successful professionally and personally. With your host, Mark Bidwell.
Hello, welcome back to our listeners to our first show in Season 3. And if you're listening for the first time, welcome to the Innovation Ecosystem Podcast. My name is Mark Bidwell, and I'm really excited to have back on the show Lisa-Bodell, who was a previous guest from Season 1, and who's here to talk to us about her new book, Why Simple Wins. And I gave out copies of this book recently at our inaugural Innovation Leadership Circle event. And one of the attendees read the first chapter and instantly ordered copies for every single one of his direct reports. This is a really relevant topic. It's a great book, and I'm sure you're going to love this interview. In this interview, she tells us about the rationale behind the book, and she gives us proven tools to reduce and eliminate the complexities in our lives and our working environments. And she shares some insights into how companies such as Southwest Airlines, SAP, and Syngenta are tackling simplification and the significant business benefits that they're able to derive, both in terms of extracting higher margins in the marketplace as well as increasing workplace retention and engagement in the employees. And both of these things come explicitly from eliminating complexity. And she gives us a sneak peek at her favorite tool, which is called Killing Complexity, that we are able to source and let you have, and you can find out more details at the end of the interview, but you can use this for yourself and your team. And she also goes into the 5 tests for simplicity. You know, is it valuable? Is it minimal? Is it understandable? Is it repeatable? And is it accessible? Again, very, very practical tools and approaches that Lisa's a master at communicating. So I think you'll find a huge amount of value in this interview. And before we go, just like to invite you to contribute and participate in the conversation around innovation ecosystem. So please go to our site, www.innovationecosystem.com, download some of the materials we're making available for you there. Sign up to our regular newsletter and follow us on social media. So without any further ado, I'd like to introduce you to Lisa-Bodell. So welcome to the Innovation Ecosystem. This is Mark Bidwell, and welcome to Lisa-Bodell. Lisa, you were on our first show several months ago and was one of the most popular podcast episodes that we did. So welcome back to the show.
Oh, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
So Lisa, one of the big insights from our conversation was, you talked about the need to create space to innovate. And so maybe we can start there. Why is that so important, and how do you help companies, go about creating space?
Well, what I've learned is that as somebody who really goes out and helps teach change and innovation, people have the desire to want to actually make change happen, but they don't have the time or the ability to have time to think. And so that's what I mean by creating space. It's really about creating mind space and creating time to be able to do it. And so, what I found is we're very good at putting in policies, reports, procedures, these things to kind of control risk, but we're not so good at putting in policies to be able to take one. So what happens is we put a lot of things in place that then take up our time, so we don't have any left to do thinking. So what I want to be able to do is teach people how to get rid of things and create space for stuff that is positive versus stuff that is just sucking our time in meaningless tasks.
And that's basically your subject of your new book, Why Simple Wins, right?
Exactly. That's exactly it. I've spent the last 20 years talking about innovation, and I have to tell you, within the last 5 years, it's become increasingly difficult to get people to do it. No one questions the fact that innovation is important. The question is, why aren't we better at making it happen? Right? We've got the budgets, we've got the strategic pillars, we've got the things outlined on our websites and our annual reports. So why aren't more people doing it? And why do we keep quoting the same case studies again and again and again? And it's because we've made things so complex that people can't actually make it happen. So I really am preaching to people that we've got to make simplification our new operating system. We have to empower people to get rid of outdated processes, policies, procedures. And this isn't just about eliminating things to be efficient. This is to create a culture that allows innovation to happen and get rid of meaningless work.
So what has happened in the last 5 years, or what's brought this to the fore? Because I'm sure lots of people, this will resonate with people. And you've told me personally that you have people after you give your speeches who come up and give you a hug because it's such an emotive issue. So what's the reason behind this?
Well, the first thing that people point to when it comes to complexity is there's a lot of regulations and there's a lot of organizational complexity. And I think that that's very true. We actually create the beast that we become a slave to, right? All these policies and procedures and governing bodies. And what's happening here is that people really, they want to be able to create change, but they can't get out of the structure that they're actually tied to every single day. So what I want people to be able to get comfortable with is first being able to be empowered to get rid of things and constantly streamline. And to actually make simplification a habit. So the reason I'm saying this is because a lot of companies do it through efficiency. They report to the COO. It's meant to be cost cutting. And the result of that is they have less people doing twice as much work, right? They're very effective. I can do the job of 2 people. I can multitask. That's not what this is about. This is about creating the space to do things that are more meaningful and add value to the bottom line. Mm-hmm. So value isn't one more report. Value is coming up with new ideas, new procedures, new services, being able to get out with our customer more. And that's what we want to create the space to do. That's why simplification has to be at the forefront.
And is this to do with, technology? Is it to do with the pace of change, more regulation, more competition? I mean, what if you were to put your finger on the sort of the top 3 things that have created this monster? And that's the language you use in the book, I think. I mean, what
Sure.
are they?
Well, first of all, there definitely are government regulations. I mean, there's no doubt that there's a lot of regulations put on people. That's one. The second is scale. I mean, I just think that we live in a global world now. We actually have had a lot of growth through mergers and acquisitions. And it is unquestionable that corporations that are more multinational and larger, the larger you get, the more scale you have, the more complex they are. There's just more to manage. And I mean that in terms of processes, but also in terms of people. Mm-hmm. Because the next driver is technology. And, so we talk about regulations, then it's about scale, then technology. And technology is a double-edged sword. There was a really great article in HBR, Harvard Business Review, earlier this year that talked about technology. Is it helpful or does it hinder us? And the answer is yes. It can help us, but just because we can doesn't mean we should. Just because we can send one email, why don't we send it to 50 people and copy everybody? Just because we can have one report, why don't we have 12? Just because we can measure, have 3 metrics of data, why don't we have 12? Because data is available. So we kind of take things to the nth degree, and that starts to create that beast that really we become a slave to.
Yeah. I mean, but you run a small. I mean, you're obviously you're global in your reach. But your company, what is it, 20 people, something like that? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And yet you talk about in the book some new employee who, after 2 weeks, had uncovered all sorts of complexity in your organization. So I mean, is it just related to? Is it just limited to large, complex,
No.
Global organizations? It's for smaller startups as well, or smaller organizations too?
No, it exists everywhere. And that, I talk about the bigger things that are easier to pinpoint first, things like regulation, just what we just talked mm-hmm. about, scale, technology. But the reality is the key driver around complexity is humans. Yep. And so it gets to individual behavior. So I have to say that's one of the most interesting things that I uncovered in my book was people first, they point to organizational complexities. But when they really start breaking down what consumes them every day and what annoys them the most, they're individual complexities. Mm-hmm. So these are things like policies, reports, meetings, emails. I mean, when I go out and I ask people, what do you spend your day doing? They say meetings and emails, universally. And that's a real sad thing. But those things are driven by, whether you're a small organization, a big organization, very human things, which are risk, fear, power, control, trust. Mm-hmm. Or lack thereof. So we need to start to build these cultures that first get rid of, right? Teach the behaviors that it's not okay to make things complex, to spend things or waste your time, right, on things that are meaningless, whether you're at a small company or big company. So I will tell you, at my small company, it is very easy for us to get bogged down in meetings and reports and emails just like everybody else. Probably not to the same degree, but those things alone really hinder us, and they take us away from being out with customers versus just analyzing and navel gazing internally. So it happens everywhere.
Yeah. But as you say, I mean, it does start with the individual. It's there's a little bit, I think you talk about the pursuit of more. There is this there's also this fear of missing out, I guess, as well, which is quite a powerful motivation.
Yeah, we definitely have an addiction to more. This is, again, whether you're at a big company or small, we value more. No one gets rewarded, no matter what the size of organization, for less, unless you're in a cost-cutting mode. But that eventually is just because they want you to take on more. So we are addicted to, first of all, being busy, because that shows value. If you're not busy, you must not be worth very much or have a lot of power. Also, we are rewarded for managing more people, more products, more markets, more projects. So, of course, if the metric is more, and that's where you get your reward, that's what you're going to strive for. So the idea of eliminating is very scary to people, because they start to question their worth and their perception of them being able to provide value in an organization.
So, I mean, what are the warning signs for people listening at the moment who are wondering whether, how complex are they? How big a problem is it? I mean, I know there are a lot of tools that you make available in the book and elsewhere, which we can talk about. But I mean, what are the kind of warning signs that should be triggering, making people think that they've got a real problem, perhaps that they're not necessarily aware of at the moment?
Sure. You continually receive, they're very basic things, right? It's looked down upon for you to question things. There are constantly more rules put in place, and it is frowned upon for you to eliminate things. It is difficult for you to say no to projects or to meetings. The way that you manage it is more important for you to have a report done than it is for you to go out and meet a client. I mean, these are very basic things, that internal is favored more than external. Management or risk control things are more valuable than taking a risk. Mm-hmm. So it's really important for you as a leader, as well as an individual, to figure out, how do you spend your time, and what are the behaviors that are driving those things? The behaviors are where the red flags come. The inability to make a decision with having multiple people involved. The need to CC and BC things because you need to make sure you've politically signed off on things. Those kinds of things are triggers that are individual issues, not organizational. Mm-hmm.
And then organizationally, I suppose there is, I mean, we've talked about it in the past, this idea of Noah's Ark management, where you have, two people doing the same thing, duplicated across organizations. I mean, I guess a look at the organizational chart, or a look at who's sitting in the meeting, if there's two of everything there, then that's a big sign as well, of course.
Yes, I love, I have to give you credit, Mark. I love that phrase, Noah's Ark management. It's just so crystallizes in people's mind what happens, because everyone gets it, right? Yep. We have to check off with more people than we normally need to. So these layers of decision making, or what most people say lack of decision making, is another huge red flag within a company. Mm.
Yeah, I mean, I was struck by the opening chapter of your book. You talk about someone sat in traffic going to the office, and in many respects that's a wonderful analogy. I mean, it feels, if you're operating in this kind of environment, it does feel like you're stuck in the traffic, or you're driving with your foot on the brake as well. I mean, it just feels like the organization's clogged up, and you're just unable to reach critical mass and get stuff done, essentially.
Yeah, I mean, it's a hypocrisy, right? It's kind of like they want you to innovate, but not that much, right? They want you to color a picture of the future, but only within certain lines. So, we're operating with handcuffs, and we need to better operate with what we call guardrails, right? Boundaries that we can operate in, and trust people more in terms of being able to make a decision, to be able to go out and see a client, maybe that they can operate with one less report and one less meeting in order to get things done. And until we get comfortable with less, we're not going to be able to achieve more.
Yeah. So it's a very cultural, very much about the organization's culture, essentially, as well as the environment it's operating in and the regulatory environment. But I mean, so in the book, you make available a number of tools. I mean, what are and one of the tools from an earlier book, Lisa, was the Killer Stupid Rule tool.
Yes.
Which we've made available to our listeners, and I get lots of great feedback about how people use that. But what are the tools that are there any tools specifically that people can use to actually really start cutting through some of these issues and understand how bad it is, but more importantly, what can they do about it?
Absolutely, there's many tools. In fact, we've created 13 that we put into a toolkit that goes along with the book, because we are very determined to give people the how-to to get this stuff done. People are aware it's a problem. They want to know now what. And one of the favorite tools is called Killing Complexity. And I'll just focus on the start of the tool. And really what it does is it asks people to create a T-chart individually. And what we're trying to do is figure out, what do they spend their time doing? And on the left hand of the chart, we say, why don't you write down your most common tasks that you do with your job? And those tasks can be, daily, weekly, monthly, whatever those might be. And try to get 20 tasks down. And people have a pretty easy time doing that. The goal is to be specific, right? Don't just say meetings, say what kind of meetings. Don't just say reports, what kind of reports. And then we ask them to look at their list and we say, circle the ones that you think actually represent valuable work, that contribute, right, to moving the business ahead. Mm-hmm. Now, what's interesting here is that people circle very few. And then we have this discussion, right, about why did you only circle a few? How did you categorize valuable work? What makes something valuable? And usually what it gets down to is time versus value. Mm-hmm. And how much time do you spend on it? And what does it do in terms of growing the business? And people realize they don't spend a lot of time on things that add value. So then we move them to the right-hand column and say, what do you wish you spent your time doing? And that's really telling because that forces people to articulate what they want to be spending their time doing, what they do view as valuable work, and to identify the gap between, on the left-hand side, unvaluable work, invaluable work, to get them to the right-hand side. And we identify tasks that can get them from left to right.
And the outcome of this, I mean, any stories of specific clients that you worked on that have seen the light or been able to sort of free up resources to go after new commercial opportunities, for instance?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, we just finished up a session most recently when we were working with Merck. And what's really interesting about it is when you ask people to write down their tasks, they realize in this instance that they were spending a lot of time in unnecessary meetings, right? Meeting. And people were talking about it in terms of regulation. And of course, if you're regulated, you really got to make sure that you cross your T's and dot your I's. But what they realized were a lot of these things, it wasn't about regulation. It was about managing people's time and not trusting them. Mm-hmm. And so what they decided to do was do an audit of all their meetings and kill stupid meetings. And what they found is that they were able to reduce their meetings by about, I think, 17%. And that was really shocking because think about it, if you could free up almost 20% of your time, how much more valuable things you could be doing. So that alone was just, it's a simple anecdote. And the things that you find they're revelations in very simple ways, right? You're not going to realize, oh my God, I could have done, created this new drug. What you're going to find out is there's some really simple things we can get rid of right now so I can make the space for change to happen.
Yeah. And I guess one of the things you gave some examples of companies that actually have built their business models around simplicity. And Southwest or Google or Scripps Health. I mean, these are three examples you give. I mean, maybe the Southwest Airlines is an easy one to understand, but for a lot of European, there are companies like this all over the world now, but they were the pioneers. Maybe can you just a couple of examples associated with that company and, what makes them, because it's a source of competitive advantage for them essentially, isn't it?
Yeah, that's the big thing about simplicity, which is, it's not just about efficiency, it's competitive advantage. I think it'll be the competitive advantage of our time because we know now it's not about scale that makes you successful, it's about speed. Mm-hmm. And so if you're going to operate with complexity, then speed's out the window. So, you are shooting yourself in the foot, so to speak. And, one thing about Southwest Airlines, and of course is the equivalent all over the world from, your Ryanair, your EasyJets, whatever it might be. And the idea that Southwest had was, look, they said, we're going to focus on one thing, cost-effective travel. And we are going to make sure that people can get on the planes on and off. We're not going to have different classes of seating. We're not going to have lots of complex food that we serve. We're going to have people that get on and off the plane with little fanfare. They really streamlined it. And they were unapologetic about it. In fact, there's one story I tell where someone, a passenger was on the plane, and they afterwards wrote a letter to the CEO complaining that there wasn't first-class seating, the food was horrible, how they boarded the plane was terrible. And Herb Kelleher wrote back and said, we'll miss you. I'm sorry, but that's not what we offer. And I like that because why should you apologize when that's not your business model? And they took it even further, from the operations side, which is, one thing is the external, the other is the internal. And rather than having, like American Airlines at the time, 14 different types of airplanes that they managed, Southwest had one. And it was great because whenever one plane had a problem, they could easily swap it out with another one at an airport. Every time you got on and off that plane, it was the same configuration. Everyone knew how to fly the plane with little fanfare. The slotting was exactly the same from airport to airport. So, making those decisions and being confident about them that it wasn't, that people wanted a choice of 14 was really irrelevant to them. They said one plane, this is what we offer, and they were successful as a result.
And it's a very compelling story for startups, thinking about, what's the business model that we want to operate by and the source of competitive advantage. But for the large, let's take it for example, a pharma example you talked about earlier on. I mean, these are companies with existing business models with huge sort of infrastructure machinery in their organizations. I mean, how easy is it for companies, or other examples of companies that have actually radically simplified their businesses and stripped it all the way back? Or is it more a case of companies are on this journey and to a greater or lesser extent? I mean, I think you mentioned SAP and GE in our conversations. I mean, how are they going after this, for instance?
Well, I mean, I think on one hand, SAP is saying from their own standpoint that they want to simplify, because they realize that they, as a large organization, for them to be able to operate and compete faster, especially in technology, they can't be complex. But also externally, customers are saying, what, technology has become too complex to handle. My organization needs to be able to integrate things faster. So they realize that simplicity in terms of their offering is truly a competitive advantage for them to go up against others. So there's both a selling perspective as well as an internal operations perspective. GE is very interesting because they're at the forefront of so many management principles, and simplification is the one they are placing a bet on. So is Altria, so is P&G, so is Merck, so is so many other people.
So is Syngenta, as we know. We've spoken to them, and that's one of their core activities, going forward as well, is to simplify, right?
Exactly. And, I give them kudos, because I think they are people that are identifying this now. They are early adopters, and they are visionaries and understanding, look, speed is where it's at. And if we don't do it internally, we can't do it externally. And people don't want things more complex. They want things of value, because if you offer things simply to them, they realize they can trust you. They realize that things are accessible to them, and they realize that they can move faster to getting what they want. So, we use these examples of Syngenta, very smart to be able to operate with simplicity. GE, same thing. They want to make sure that all their managers are being rewarded not for more, but for simplicity. Mm-hmm. And that's a very big mindset shift. And I think any organization that can get there will win.
Yeah. Well, it's so let's talk a little bit about what leadership looks like in this world of simplification. Because I mean, ultimately, one would imagine the leaders need to walk the talk and demonstrate the competencies or behaviors associated with simplification or simplicity. What I mean, you talk about them in the book. I think you have 6 characteristics. Can you just take us through them and maybe what does most of the heavy lifting? I mean, I know they're all important, but maybe you can share the 6. Then from your perspective, what makes a big difference?
Well, let me tell you the ones that I think I would focus on the most, actually, because it's different from every organization, right? Depending on the type of leader, the type of company, the type of industry you're in. But I think first and foremost is this being confident in less. And what I mean by that is being okay with the fact that they will let things go. So they look at their product portfolio, for example, and of 100 things that are in the works, everybody has those projects that maybe aren't doing so well, but they never kill them, those zombie projects that go on forever, and they suck up people's time. They are confident with eliminating those things to focus on what's best. So this is the confident of lesser focus, I'll say. Mm-hmm. So that's one I think is very important. The second one is empowerment. I worked with an organization, S&P, and they talked very much about empowering people. And what that meant was many people say that they want to be empowered to do things, but they didn't feel like they could actually do it. So this leader said, you know what, I'm going to empower my people actually to make decisions. And what was really interesting about that was he mandated every month that people had to make a couple decisions without him. And at first, people had a really hard time doing it because they couldn't get out of the habit of checking off with him. Should so-and-so be invited to the meeting? Is it okay if I go out and do this? Can I spend this amount of money? And he had to say to them, listen, that's a decision you could make without me. And eventually, it was 2 decisions a month they made without him, then 3, then 4. Suddenly, he had so much time on his hands to do more valuable work, and his people felt so much more empowered that they were more successful as a part of the organization. Mm-hmm. So that's another thing that I think is really important, focus and empowerment with decision making. From there, I think it's also creating a habit around simplification. So these are people that actually don't just do it as a one-off. They do it as something that's an ongoing principle. So they either do that by assigning people within their groups to look out for things that are becoming bureaucracy and they cut it out, or they make it, a few times a year where they actually get together and say, what's not working? What can we as a team agree to eliminate right now and never do again?
Yeah. I mean, I'm struck as you talk about the behavioral habits. I mean, one of the a previous after our interview, Lisa, I interviewed a guy called Professor Larry Cunningham, who talked about, he's the biographer of Berkshire Hathaway, Warren Buffett's company, and he talks about the link between performance and autonomy. And, for those who know about, Warren Buffett and how he runs his business, I mean, it employs something like 400,000 people, and they've got a headquarters staff of 2.5 people. It is about as streamlined as it gets on the planet in terms of corporate structure. And yet the performance they've managed to generate by this autonomy, by this empowerment, if you like, is quite remarkable. And that's a theme you're saying exactly the same thing, but from a different angle, essentially.
That's exactly right. Now that's someone that right there is a bit of leadership that is confident, right, in terms of less, and also is focused. And I really like that because, they get rid of the noise and they're confident about it. And I think that's how you can operate both efficiently and with simplicity in mind. Yeah.
And the interesting thing about focus, it doesn't mean focusing on one market. I mean, because they're in dozens and dozens and dozens of markets, but they're really clear what they're good at. It says circle of competence they talk about.
That's right. And focus can mean many things. It doesn't have to mean laser focusing on one thing, but it's about clarity. And that is really important. So that gets into defining simplicity, right? People think it's only about less and focusing on one thing, and then they feel nervous, right? Oh, I don't want to put my eggs in one basket. But that's not what it is. Focus is about clarity, and that allows you to make decision-making faster and with confidence.
Yep. So let's talk a little bit about the benefits. I mean, what for companies going down this road? What's the data say, or what's your experience say about the benefits they can derive from a disciplined approach to simplicity, if you like?
Well, there's many, and it's very, very encouraging. The first is through Siegel and Gale, who did a real good simplicity index study. They found that customers would pay a price premium to deal with companies that operate with simplicity. And the price premium was between 6 to 10%. And in some industries, that's significant. They also found that people who thought that organizations were simple were 70% more likely to recommend them to others and were more loyal to those organizations. So the retention, as well as customers operating as your best new business folks, is incredible. Internally, they found that they had a 30% higher retention of employees because people felt that they were doing more meaningful work. So when you think about the savings that you could have in terms of recruiting costs, in terms of employee management costs and rewarding, just because people are happier at the work that they do. So externally and internally, it proves to be quite a marker. The other thing they found actually in the simplicity study is that companies that operate with simplicity in mind outperform from a stock perspective by 214%. So that alone, I think, says it all for many of the leaders on this, listening to this podcast.
Interesting. I mean, and there is almost almost an ethical or a moral component around this as well, isn't it? I mean, I think you talked about it face to face when we spoke last, but I mean, it's in the book as well. I mean, getting to, and in the subtitle of the book, getting to work that matters. I mean, what we talked a little bit about the people who give you the hugs after the speech about the need to do it. What happens having done this kind of work? I mean, what's it feel like working in an organization that has had cut a lot of some of this sort of crap cut out? And I'm using that language because that's what Richard Sounds uses for their cut the crap committees, right?
That's right, cut the crap committee. And everyone gets it when you say cut the crap. They know what that means, right? And then I think what's really interesting about this is from the journey that I've been on to create the simplification book and other things, is that the first thing people think about is simplicity is it's an efficiency effort, which is true. But the second thing is they get to is it's a cultural effort, right? Operating with a culture of simplicity lets us operate with speed and be happier. But what it really comes down to, and think about this, again, it's not organizational issues, but individual issues that really get people upset, is that simplicity it's an ethical issue. And it is not okay for people to waste our money. But I have no idea why it is okay for them to waste our time. I do not understand, and people really resonate with this, why people do not get more upset when people waste their time again and again, because time is money, and time is something you can never get back. Yep. So it is invaluable to people, especially people that feel like they gave up their time for things that are not meaningful. So you have to realize this is very ethical for people. And I think especially for executives listening to this podcast, they need to really think about this from a millennial perspective. So I do believe that there are things across generations that are just equal, but especially with millennials who want meaningful work. If you cannot provide meaningful work and you are having a war for talent, you better be ready, because people are not going to come and work at your company unless you can provide them things that are meaningful and ethical.
Interesting. I mean, this isn't easy, of course, right? I mean, this is, it's simple to understand, but it's not easy. I mean, what are the, how do you suggest that people maintain their energy levels and, as they go through this process? I mean, the chief simplification officer being dropped into a large, complex, heavily regulated, global, matrixed organization. I mean, what do they need to have in mind, and what behaviors or habits do they need to kind of work on or focus on for the journey, if you like?
Well, I really admire the chief simplification officers because they do not have an easy job, and there are simplification teams, though, that we are starting to see sprung up all over the place, like in the Syngentas, for example. Kudos to them. P&G, and GE, and Van City Credit Union, and many others, I have to say. And the simplification officer, first and foremost, right, needs to understand what are the complexities that exist. Where are people spending their time? How do they define meaningful work? And then what is the definition for simplicity that they want to put forth in the organization? And this is key, right? Because understanding what meaningful work is helps you to start focus on what's the goal. And defining simplicity is about what type of simplicity are we looking at, so people understand, right? How do I simplify? And where will it take us? So all too often I see people, it's like with innovation. They put innovation officers in place, but they don't really define what type of innovation or what its goal is. Simplification is the exact same thing. Simplification is not just about eliminating stuff and minimizing. It's about much more than that, right? It's about transparency. It's about clarity and less jargon. It's about accessibility, so people can have more control and feel empowered.
Yeah, I think you have 5 tests for your simplicity, don't you? In the book, I think it's is it valuable? Is it minimal? Is it understandable? Is it repeatable? And is it accessible?
That's exactly right. The first and foremost question you have to ask, if you're going to spend your time on something, first you have to ask, is it valuable? So that's why you have to define what valuable work is. If it is not valuable, why are you doing it? That's really the first litmus test. Then, if it is valuable, you can pass go and start asking those questions of, it's a terrible acronym, I have to say, MURA, but MURA, how can you minimize it to make it more valuable? How can you make it more understandable, which is clarity? How can you make it repeatable, right, rather than customizing stuff? And so you can have best practices. And how can you make it accessible so more people can use it and you can leverage the good work that people do all the time? And getting people to think about simplification in that broader perspective, I think is very helpful, because then it gives them the tools to really go forth and say, I know how I can improve this.
Yeah. And tools, I mean, there are plenty of tools in the book, but also I think on Amazon, I guess your toolkit is available as well, isn't it? Or will be?
It will be, yes. Actually, it's coming out in just a couple weeks here. And I invite people to buy it and use it. And what's really empowering about it is, each tool there has varying degrees of what it can help you with, from killing rules to killing complexities to diagnosing what's holding you back. And it's designed, and it has facilitation techniques and timing on it, so every person can get to simplification, in an hour or less in many instances with their teams, because we can talk about it and recognize it's a problem. That's the first step, but then getting it done is really what matters. Yeah.
Now, I mean, Lisa, in the acknowledgements of your book, you talk about, the opening line is, the irony of writing a book on simplicity is that this has been one of the most complex things I've ever done. So maybe you can just share, I mean, what are your big sort of ahas, around what has this forced you to reflect on, or what were the big learnings as you went down this, as you try to sort of make a complex subject simple and give people the tools to cut through some of this stuff?
The first was the importance of recognizing we have an addiction to more, that we value more, and we have to get around a comfortable place of less is okay, right? Mm-hmm. Quality over quantity. The second thing is that our perception around simplicity might be wrong. So I think that most of us think it's regulation and organizational issues, when in fact it is individual and very basic things that hold us back. And then finally, I think that it's about defining simplicity for people. It's giving people kind of that way forward or that compass so they can understand what to do about it. And then in most instances, it's not just empowering people to do it, but I will tell you in the more complex or fearful organizations, it's mandating it. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of ironic, right? To mandate simplicity. But I think because the things that hold us back are so individual and human, risk, fear, power, control, until they see a signal from a leader that mandates that they must say no to things, that mandates that they will measure the amount of meetings eliminated, that mandates that decision-making must be made without them, it will be very hard to change habits and behaviors.
Yeah. And from your point of view, as a founder of a company, a CEO, and also, an advisor to lots of organizations on this journey, I mean, what have you done in this area personally or professionally? I mean, to what extent have you been able to simplify parts of your professional life?
Well, it's interesting. So for me, we have a ritual that we do every year in around, I guess it's the end of January, beginning of February, for our strategic planning. We get together for a day, and each person presents their part of the business, talks about what they would improve on it. And then at the end of the day, as a group, we kill our company. And what that does is we target the things that are not working to make space for things that are. And then we kill stupid rules. So first we look at what are the structures that we've put in place in our company that make us weak, and then what are the rules that we need to perhaps eliminate and get rid of that have been put in place over time and aren't working anymore. And we ceremonially kill them together, and that's very empowering for people.
Yeah, fantastic. So Lisa, where can people get in touch with you? Before we wrap up the three questions, where can people get in touch with you?
They can get in touch with me. Well, first of all, come to futurethink.com at our website, and they can learn more about what we do. And you're also welcome to email me at lbodell, LBODELL, at futurethink.com. And I would love to hear from people, their complexity stories, or the ways that they have simplified their work. That would be really helpful for me.
Brilliant. And we'll put those in the show notes. So I sent you three questions earlier on in the show, a couple of days ago. Now, let's just go through these if we can. I mean, firstly, what have you changed your mind about recently?
What I've changed my mind about recently is the fact that people do not feel empowered to simplify. I thought that they were certainly not being lazy, but they just weren't focused on it. And I think that that's not the issue. People are focused on wanting to simplify, but they don't feel empowered to do it. So that has really been a mind shift for me of how important it is for leaders to empower people and even mandate them to make it happen. That will change the behavior. Yeah.
And of course, things like performance management systems to support that mandate are fundamental for these large organizations as well, I guess.
Very much so. Very much so. So it's also putting those metrics in place to allow people to simplify. We have to measure it and realize that that's something that isn't necessarily in place right now.
Yep. Second question. I mean, your business is all about innovation. This is, your new book is very innovative. It's pushing the boundaries of thinking in a new subject. What do you do to remain creative and innovative, Lisa?
Well, two things. The first is that I create wander time. And that could be either in New York City when I wander and get something different to eat, or, I take a new route home. Or when I travel. I think you need to build in time just to wander and have serendipity take over. You never know if you're going to go into, take a new route, find a new coffee shop, whatever it might be, to kind of shake you out of your habits in your comfort zone. So that's number one. And the second thing is to remain creative is I actively, once a week, try and reach out to somebody who is very different than myself. Maybe they have a different point of view. Maybe they operate in a very different industry. Maybe they have a job that is just, I can't even believe that it exists. And what that does is it allows me to connect different dots. So I would invite people to do that, either change their habit by taking a different route or wander time, or reaching out to people that do things differently than them so they can learn.
Yep. Love it. Third question, to what do you attribute your success in life? Are there any specific skills or habits or mindsets that you've mastered that have really had a significant impact, do you think?
Yeah, resilience. I really do. I have to say, I think a lot of people feel that way. I think that, especially for the people listening that that operate with complexity every day at work. I know that what they go through is very hard. And the second thing is, if you are in charge of simplification, I know that your job is going to be very hard, because people like status quo. They like the way things are. They have assumptions around how things have to be. And until you show them through quick wins and through changing policies or behaviors, it will be very hard to change people's mind. And I think you can't give up. You need to be resilient, and you need to try lots of different things to make it happen, because it is important, and it is absolutely what companies need to be competitive and successful in the future.
Yeah, and not just economically, but also, as you say, from a retention point of view, from an impact on society point of view. I mean, this is big stuff, isn't it?
Well, and that in turn will create positive impact economically. Absolutely. Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, Lisa, it's been a great pleasure to have you back on the show. I know a number of people are very interested in this conversation. I was, I'm sure our audience enjoyed it as much as I did. Thank you very much once again for your time.
Mark, thank you. It was wonderful.
Okay, have a great day. Bye.
You too. Bye-bye.
Hi, it's Mark again. I hope you found that as useful as I did. So a few things that really resonated with me. I mean, clearly in our work lives, we spend a huge amount of time doing things that don't add value. And there are tools out there that can help us reduce this complexity, and we can start working on things that are truly meaningful to ourselves and our businesses. And often simplification is not about changing processes and rules, but it's about changing behaviors, attitudes, and relationships. I mean, secondly, simplicity isn't just about being efficient, it's about speed and focus. And it can be a great selling proposition, as well as from an internal operations perspective. So the example from SAP, the example that people are willing to pay more for simple products and services, and also the value that internal employees place on being able to bring forward their best work. I love the comment that she mentioned in the book, but she didn't bring it up in the interview. But innovation is saying no to 1,000 things. And the benefit of moving from doing more to actually extracting meaning. So that's very, very relevant in today's workplace. And then finally, this was a hugely relevant point for me. And simplicity is an ethical issue. I mean, wasting people's time on meaningless things and tasks is fundamentally unethical. So simplicity is key in the search for meaningful work, both as individuals, but also as leaders. We need to hold on to that and make sure that that's reflected in how we lead our organizations and how we structure work. So it's not okay to waste people's valuable time. And that's a message that Lisa articulated very clearly. So what we've been able to do, and we make it available in the show notes, is the tool Killing Complexity, which you can download and you can apply in your workplace. Please do let us know how you get on with that. Share it with us as well. You can leave a note in the on our website at the bottom of the post for this interview. Hope you enjoyed it, and until next time, have a great week.